welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's episode is going to be part 2 of a series that I'm doing called Working In, and then whatever setting that I've worked in. So I think a lot of times with therapists, they're trying to figure out where to work, what they want to do, what direction to take their career in. So I want to cover some of the different settings I've worked in so that way you can learn a little bit more about it from somebody who's been there and get a firsthand account of what some of these settings can look like and pay and benefits and all of the different things. So disclaimer, this is all based off of my experience. Some of it is collectively things that I've heard from other people who've worked in similar settings or coworkers that I've had. But for the most part, it is going to be, like I said, just an overview. Depending on the type of facility you work at, what its goal is, how much money funds it, all of that, there's going to be varied answers on some of the details. But I want to make sure everyone knows the basics of working in this type of setting before you decide to commit to it. So let's get into this one. Today's episode is working in an inpatient unit. So some people call it a psych unit. Depending on the facility, it might be a detox unit. So that's what we'll go over today. So I did an internship my second year of grad school for my master's in social work program. I did it at an inpatient unit. So what that means is a lot of hospitals have a psychiatric unit, and it's typically a locked unit. So whoever's on that unit, floor, department, whatever it is, they can't leave unless you're a staff member. So high security. It is typically for people who have either had suicidal thoughts with a plan, they've shown that they are in some way a danger to themselves or others, they may have overdosed on substances, and they need to be in a facility for a short period of time to help them stabilize and get connected with resources to further their care. So there's a lot of stereotypes when it comes to inpatient units or psych units. Some of them are accurate and some of them really aren't. So I'll go over some of that today. But when I worked inpatient, I was there for about 9 months, I think, for basically the entire second year of grad school. And it was a really, really great experience. So the way that psych units are typically structured, if you're staff, you will be there very consistent hours, whether it's 7:30 to 4:30, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever it is. You will have set hours Monday through Friday that you work. That's nice. Typically, you aren't on call, though some units do have like a phone or some kind of like on-call person. But usually it's just, that's for the ER to deal with and make those determinations for who needs to be checked in. Most of the time it's going to be, or it might be a psychiatrist who's on staff. But most of the time when you're a therapist working in inpatient, you go to work and then you come home. You don't work weekends. The downside of inpatient sometimes though is because it's always running, including like holidays, you might have to work some holidays. Typically what happens on those holidays is a lot of the staff gets together and everybody kind of picks one or two that they're willing to work. And you're usually not doing a ton of work that day if you're the therapist that's there on staff for that holiday, but you definitely have to get dressed up and go to work. So that's not always as fun, but hopefully you work with great people and everybody's willing to split things up. So I know when I worked at Inpatient, I was a student, so I was on break for all of those holidays, but I was part of the staff meetings where I would hear people collaborating on, well, you did Christmas Eve last year, let me do it this year, or I'm not traveling for Thanksgiving, I'll take that one on, if you can come in on Good Friday for me, or whatever it was. So people were pretty collaborative. They're used to the system, and people tend to look out for each other. So that part is a little but it doesn't happen that often. There's not that many holidays. So it is nice to have a pretty consistent day-to-day schedule. With that means that you tend to have consistent pay, and hospitals tend to pay a good amount. I think more so than some other facilities, especially if you're just starting out in this field. they tend to pay pretty well, and the benefits are pretty good too. You usually get some kind of paid time off. You usually get good insurance because it's a hospital. So that's a great package deal when it comes to looking for a job that is going to provide you with good pay and benefits. There's usually a structure for raises and things like that too. So just keep that in mind if the income is something, especially early in your career, you really need. That needs to be like a main focus. So, and I think for most of us it is. But yeah, so with inpatient care, what tends to happen from the client side, and usually they'll call them patients in this setting because they're in a hospital. So I'll call them patients for that sake for this episode. But so a patient will come in typically through the ambulance, sometimes through the police, and sometimes through a family member or friends, and they will go through the ER where they're evaluated, and the ER will make a determination that it is a psychiatric case. Sometimes the psychiatrist will go down and talk to the person and admit them. Sometimes there's somebody else, a doctor or somebody that's responsible for that. And then that client, if it's found that they need that extra care and stability and they aren't safe or they're posing some sort of safety risk to people, then they end up going to the psych unit. So the psych unit tends to be a set amount of beds, whether it's a hallway, it's a section of the hospital, it's a floor of the hospital, depending on how big it is. There tends to be some sort of, like I said, locked unit where everybody stays. I know the facility that I was at, it was like almost a whole floor, I guess, but it was like 20 something beds, and it was substance abuse, so people detoxing as well as people who needed some sort of like stabilization when it came to either suicidal thoughts or homicidal thoughts. So everybody, there's usually like two to a bed. The floor was co-ed. Most bedrooms had a bathroom. There was a group space where it was just like an space with tables and chairs, and that's where all of the mental health groups were held. There was maybe an office or two that were primarily for sessions, intakes, family sessions, individual sessions, stuff like that. And then there was a day room, which has art supplies, a TV, sometimes maybe like coffee or water, something like that. And that's where the patients can hang out throughout the day if they're not in group or they're not in some sort of session. There's a nurse's station, and there's typically nurses, and they're in charge of doing the medication. There's usually a charge nurse who's responsible for the other nurses and kind of making sure things are going well. There tends to be psych techs, which can be, I think sometimes associate level, but bachelor's level workers who kind of keep everything going, make sure that everybody's abiding by the rules. People aren't just laying in bed all day. They're going to groups, they're going to their sessions, and they're getting the most of their care. And psych techs are amazing. They're the ones like really out there all day doing all of the things for the clients. So therapists and psychiatrists, we get to like come in, do our group, go do some notes. Come in, do a session, go do some notes. So definitely make friends with all of the people on the unit if possible, because they are going to know a lot and they've seen some things. So stick with them. Be nice to all of the people on staff, because it really is a huge team. And that's a big benefit of working at a hospital is you, especially early in your career, and I really liked this as an intern, is you got a bunch of different people there who you can ask questions to. So I know that there was a case manager when I worked, and shout out to Brandy. But she was a case manager, bachelor's level social work. And so what she would do is from the second the clients got there, and they were assessed and we figured out what it was that they needed. Is it that they were in a housing crisis? Did they need continued substance abuse treatment? Were they being abused at home? And, elderly abuse, we saw that quite a few times. And social services needed to be involved, or whatever the situation was, she would know what was going on with them, and she would coordinate care, and immediately from the second they got there, start calling different places and setting up what their discharge plan was going to be for when they leave the hospital. So most times people are only in the hospital like 5 to 7 days. Sometimes maybe like 5 to 10, but it's very short care. You are really just there to get them through that initial crisis, and then they go to wherever it is that they're going to get full care later on. So whether that's a rehab facility, whether that is meeting with an individual therapist, whether that's a step down program like intensive outpatient, that's 3 times a week, or partial hospitalization, that's 5 days a week, whatever comes next for them, the case managers really work on figuring that out. They're making all the calls, they're coordinating with the facilities, and they're coming up with that plan with the client and for the client. So absolutely make friends with them too. They do a lot of work and coordination. So most of the days at the hospital would start out with a treatment team meeting. So we would all have a list of everyone who was on the unit that day, and the charge nurse, psychiatrist, therapist, typically a psych tech or two. We'd all be in one room and go over every patient. How'd they sleep? Who's eating? How are they responding to the meds? What's going on with their family? What's going on with finances? What's going on with their aftercare plan? And everybody would just kind of staff each client down the list, or each patient on the list, and talk about what it was that they needed, how they were in group, how other clients or patients were responding to them, stuff like that. So it was really nice to start the day out with kind of an overview about everybody and then know what to do for the rest of the day. The hospital system too is very structured. So you would tend to have your time that it's like, this is your group. So I would run a process group every morning while everyone's getting their breakfast and meds, and we were in the treatment team meetings. After that, then I would go to the group room, and everybody on all of the patients, 20 of them, 20 something of them, would all be in a room with me, and I would be running process group. So all that meant was, how's everybody doing today? How are you feeling? What's coming up for you? You know, what do you guys want to talk about? And you're running groups. So process groups can be kind of tough, especially for newer therapists, because you don't know what's going to come out of some people's mouths. And I really wish that there was, I don't, but I do, wish that there was some kind of like improv, acting class, something like that in grad school, even just like a little mini course on it, because some of the stuff that you hear, especially when you're running a group like a process group that is just so open and anything can be talked about, you're going to hear some wild things. And the amount of times that you have to control your face, it's really Oscar worthy some days. It's really Oscar worthy. You're also going to have some people in the group, I can think of quite a few times that this happened, people that were really mad that they were there. There was people angry that they attempted suicide and they woke up. There were people who were so frustrated that there was no outdoors time and they couldn't get a cigarette, because now they're detoxing off of nicotine, and for a lot of them, that was worse than some of the heroin detoxes that I saw. They were mad. Some people were just so sluggish because they had taken a bunch of pills, or they were on the wrong medication, or they just hadn't slept in a long time. And you're dealing with all kinds of personalities, all kinds of levels of stability and instability, physically, mentally, socially. Sometimes you're dealing with people who have not been around this many people in a long time. So it's definitely a juggling act to make sure everyone in the group is participating and everybody feels heard. Everyone has the opportunity to speak. Everyone's respecting each other. It's a lot of work, but you start to get a rhythm of it for a while, and it's always good to have like a backup plan. But I liked that the day started with a group. I then immediately got to know everybody. So since I already heard about everybody in the morning, maybe depending on the day of the week, I already know who everybody is. I can then structure the rest of the day. So while I would be doing that group, maybe the case manager, she would be pulling somebody from the group to talk about their plans for after they get discharged. And the nurse might be pulling somebody, or the psychiatrist might be pulling somebody to talk about med stuff. So it really worked well to have these set groups, and then everybody getting pulled here and there to get different resources. So there tended to be a substance abuse group. There was a recreational therapy group most days. Sometimes the psych techs would teach their own groups, whether it was something psychoeducation about like nutrition and mental health, or sometimes people would teach yoga or different things, art therapy. So there was lots of different services, and considering people are only there like a week or so, they really get a lot of comprehensive care in different areas. So That is great on the therapist side of things because you have all of these resources. It's also nice if you like a more fast-paced environment because there's constantly new patients coming in and other patients leaving. So you're exposed to a lot of different people. There's so much diversity in that type of setting because there's just a lot of people coming and going. So I got to see presentations from a lot of different types of mental health disorders, a lot of different types of drugs at that point too, a lot of like medication side effects that cause psychosis or different things that people were experiencing, and kind of being able to witness all of that firsthand and really learn. So to me, especially in the beginning of my career, that was a great experience. And you get to know, even though it's short term, you get to know a lot of these patients. You're doing individual sessions. Maybe, their spouse brought them to the hospital and they were scared. So you meet with both of them and talk about what things will look like when they get home. How are you going to make sure that this person's safe? There's just like lots of different aspects of it. So you get a ton of experience doing groups, doing individual sessions, doing family sessions. There was also a lot of legal stuff going on because sometimes the person was brought in by the police, but if the police brought them in, the police had to be the ones to take them home. So I was having to call sheriff's departments to coordinate pickup times and stuff like that. So all kinds of things I just, again, never learned in school and just didn't anticipate being things I had to do. So you really get a lot of experience. Now, con-wise, there's occasional holidays, like I mentioned. And sometimes it can be a very difficult environment to be in because, like I mentioned earlier, some people are really, really mad that they're there. Sometimes they can be kind of violent. Sometimes they can antagonize other patients there. People will fight over phone time. People will fight over what's on the TV. Like, there's lots of different things that can come up. So you have to be mindful of, you're seeing people on like the worst week of their life, essentially. And you've just got to be prepared for all the different things that can come with that. Sometimes some people can feel a bit claustrophobic because you're on the locked unit. And even though you have a badge, that can let you get off of it. Get out of that unit, go outside, go to a different floor, whatever. Sometimes that can feel a little suffocating, especially because hospitals tend to be very sterile. So it's just all white everything. And you can feel a little bit like stir crazy in there because it's just like, I get what the patients are saying. They want sunshine. They want fresh air. They want to get out and they can't. So at least not then. So that's really tough. The other thing is because you're dealing with so many people who have lost the will to live, who have attempted suicide, who are homicidal, who maybe overdosed, you need to be fully aware of what your own triggers are when it comes to those different issues and do the work on yourself before you are surrounded by that stuff every day, all day, because it is really heavy work. And it's really sad to see people that down and to know that they tried to take their own lives or that they are ashamed of their actions or, they are feeling really guilty when it comes to their family. There's so many emotions that come with that setting. So really make sure that you've got good coping skills, that you have a good support system for yourself, and you're able to walk away each day with whatever type of ritual you need. Windows down, music blasting, change clothes the second you get home. Whatever it is that can help you transition out of that, because it is really heavy work. And again, it's really rewarding too, though. I mean, I would see people that would start the week one way and end the week as a totally different person, whether they were starting on the right meds or they were finally being heard, or you did a family session with them and now they have hope for the future. Like, there's just so many good things about working in that type of setting. The other positive, which people probably don't want to admit, but when you have a really difficult patient there, it's also kind of nice to know that in a couple days they're going to check out. They're going to go to a different facility. They're going to get more help and resources that maybe are more attuned to their actual needs, since hospitals are just very, like I said, structured. Here's this group, here's this group, here's this group. Some people need more than that, or varied resources. So it's kind of nice. Sometimes outpatient care, you may be with the same client for months, for years. Residential, they're there for weeks or months. So, but in inpatient, that difficult client's only there for a week or two. So I've actually even seen people who really acted out violently in those settings. The cops came a couple times and arrested people. So, and that's the other benefit too, is there's usually really good security at hospitals. So luckily in my time there, I didn't see a lot of reasons for that, but there was definitely a couple cases where, you know, things got to that level. But for the most part, amazing experience. So if you're interested at all in crisis work, if you're interested at all in, you know, detox, in suicide prevention, and any of those types of things, it's really a great space to be able to help these clients learn a lot about yourself, learn a lot about the system in a place that there's just a ton of support all around you from all these different disciplines. So, and like I said, typically you're going to get paid better than some other types of jobs. You're going to have a better benefits package than some other types of jobs. So look at it, consider it, and yeah, see if that sounds like a good fit for you. But I hope that this episode was helpful in you deciding whether you're like, yay, hospital work, like absolutely love that idea of inpatient, or you're like, nope, not for me, not going to happen. Thanks for the info. Either way, I just hope you came away with some sort of idea of whether it's for you or not. And I will be continuing this series. So next week, tune in, subscribe below, so that way you can stay on top of the episodes as they come out. And I will see you all next time. Bye.